some video recording going on. Thank you, Robert, for coming over from the site to do this. And so we'll put this up on a YouTube channel if you'd like to look at it or share it with friends. Now today's really a hands-on demo, so please download this app if you haven't yet. You go to either the Android store or the Apple store.
This QR code only works for Android, by the way. Oversight on my part, but you can look up. Oh, did it work? Okay. It opened up the Play Store on another iPhone. So, but okay.
But if you just type in either of those places, Physics Toolbox, it will come up and grab the AR one. And it should work with any later model phone. Whatever phone you can borrow. So it's my pleasure to introduce Don.
Hello.
And he has been here about 3.5 years now, graduated from Rutgers, and is the lab coordinator for physics. And so he has lots of cool toys and magnets. And so when we met about a month ago, I was like, well, bring any magnet you want. So you can walk in with the big Tesla, and it got stuck in the metal doorway. So I'm just thrilled that you like this app and that we get to play with it today. A little of the background, this came from an NSF cyber learning grant that was put in a year ago. So we got it's a 3-year-long grant. I'm a co-PI on it, helping design it. Though I'm not a physicist, so I'm learning a lot by doing this. I'm a cognitive psychologist. I'm designing the test materials. So the first year is the building of the app, and that's done by Darius Software, and they're a fascinating husband-wife couple outside DC. She's a brilliant physicist, and he's a brilliant programmer. So they've made this entire suite, lots of fun things you can use on your phone. And in year 2, we'll work with physics teachers to see how they use the app and to design better tests for it, and design the teacher materials. So hopefully Don will help with that. And we're looking for 20 other teachers across America, so let me know if you know teachers. And then third year, we'll get into classrooms and work with college age and high school age students and see how they learn with the app. And they'll do a randomized control trial, who learns best and which conditions. So that's where we're going with this. So it's early days, but they're exciting. And the final thing I want to say is we need feedback, like usability feedback. So for instance, a month ago, we decided to put in this red up arrow at the bottom right of the interface. What do you think that means, a big red arrow going like this? I'm telling my programs, I'm like, bro, it means go to the top of the page. But in this app, we want it to be automatic dropping. So here, if you hit that red arrow, it's going to automatically every half second put down a vector as you move your phone around. So that's I think that's a nice addition to it, because otherwise you're having to tap everywhere. So you're having to move your phone and tap at the same time. It's a little awkward. But those are 2 modes that we have. So if you see something that doesn't make sense to you, like the color of the vectors is not making sense, or it's not going to be hard to do a colorblind, tell me about that, because we're still actively designing this and iterating on it. So it's not quite data. So let me know. Okay, take it away, Don.
All right. Thank you guys for coming. This is awesome. There's a little bit of a dichotomy here. On the one hand, you have a bunch of physics educators and kind of STEM educators. On the other hand, there's some people that are just enthusiastic about extended reality, of which augmented reality is a part. So brief overview of what I'm going to talk about is just augmented reality as a whole, kind of the abstraction of the high-level concepts of augmented reality. I'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of using it in physics education. I'll talk about some current applications that are out there on the mobile market for physics, education specifically, and then we'll get into the bread and butter of this talk, which is the Physics Toolbox AR. And then after that, we'll go around just testing out this app with different setups that we've brought here. So I'm with the Physics Instructional Resource Team, and what we do, and actually there's 2 other members right here up front. What we do is we design and deploy apparatus for the labs and lectures to enhance learning in physics lectures. And so that search for the next best idea led me to this augmented reality stuff. And I think this is really, really novel. It's really revolutionary. So what this app can do is something that hasn't been done before. So this is why it's a pretty exciting time to start learning about it and seeing how we can use it. So first, augmented reality, just for the physics educators here. If you're not familiar with augmented reality, it's pretty much all about 3 main things. One is overlaying virtual perceptive elements over real-world environments. So you'll probably remember like Pokemon Go, right? You would have the camera looking at something and then boom, a Pikachu shows up. That's augmented reality. You're overlaying a visual perceptive element over the real world environment. The second requirement is that there is real-time interactivity. So you are there interacting with the Pikachu, throwing virtual objects at it, trying to catch it, right? And the third tenet is that 3D representations of both the virtual and real objects need to make sense. They need to be accurate in terms of perspective and dimensionality. And when I talk about mobile AR, we're talking specifically about using your cell phone. So as you all know, you just downloaded the app. We're going to be talking mainly about that because there are other systems like HoloLens or Magic Leap, which are like dedicated headsets for this, which is a whole other ballgame. So mobile AR in physics ed. There's a lot of advantages. Obviously, the first one is that it's very, it can be cheaper than physical lab setups. We'll get into a little bit about replicating physical lab setups in a virtual environment, but I mean, these are not cheap if you got to get a whole classroom set, right? And this is just the magnet. Never mind the power supplies and the voltmeters and all that sort of thing. It can be very expensive, especially for like a high school teacher. Second, it's very, very accessible, right? Everyone that has a phone can, well, except for the iPhone 6, sorry, man. But pretty much everything, any phone made after 2015, 2016 is supported by the SDKs that these are developed on. Phones are also very highly functional, despite their form factor being very small. So something interesting, this is what we use at ASU Labs. This is a sensor, motion sensor. This is the interface that connects to the computer. Meanwhile, this is a phone, right? And all the functions of this theoretically can be carried out by this. And actually, the non-AR version of the physics toolbox does exactly that. It's got motion sensors, accelerometers, gyroscopes, inclinometers, all that sort of thing. So it's very functional, very compact, right? And then last, there are affordances in AR, which is basically a fancy way of saying that there are actions that you can take using augmented reality that are physically impossible. And this is one of the main reasons that this app is so great. And then moving on to disadvantages. Okay, there's all of this list right here pretty much comes down to the idea that the technology is novel. It's new. So when it comes to hardware, there's variability, especially in Android devices, about how to access the sensors. How precise are the sensors, right? It's hard to have an all-in-one coding scheme to address that. And because of that, there are no industry standards. I'll talk a little bit about the SDKs, but right now there's a bunch of third-party development environments for apps like this, and it's like, oh, which one do I choose? Which one's the best for my particular use case? No one knows, right? So that all ties together into the idea that this stuff is super unfamiliar for educators. If you can't even get started, how are you supposed to implement it in the classroom, right? And so yeah, it's difficult to troubleshoot, even for developers, right? Because the stack is always changing. The SDKs are always getting updated. So it's difficult to troubleshoot. So there's good advantages, there's some disadvantages, but again, as the technology just moves on forward, this stuff will kind of converge into standards that we can all use, but that's probably years out. So I'll talk about some AR physics education apps that aren't the physics toolbox. I'll just show a couple videos real quick. This one, I have these cards here. It looks at this visual target and spawns electrical components. This one currently has 25 components that follow Ohm's law, and you can kind of connect them with patch cable cards and stuff like that. And this is a great way to virtually replicate a physical lab. And I'll just move on ahead to seeing stuff like this. Oh, they made the light bulb work. That's awesome. So that's AR Circuits 4D. There's this one. This is a more complete learning app. This is called Dat Thin Pon. It's made out of a team from Myanmar. And this is a more all-in-one, another card-based one that you can see different demos, how they work, what changes the variables. And also, it comes with a learning management system. So this one's pretty cool, but it's a little more dedicated and focused in that part of the world.
So does that mean something in physics lingo? Because
What?
I'm from the South, so cone means something to me.
Oh, I think that's just the language in Myanmar. I don't know what that actually means.
That would be an insult to the corn pone that your mom cooked.
And then we've got Physics Lab AR. This one is just like on your phone. Again, you can spawn lab components, okay, just like the other ones, and kind of manipulate them. But the AR part of this is that it can detect planes and spawn animations on top of them that can be useful. So like the solar system. And this is like just on the floor. And you can see this through your phone. And there's a lot of great three-dimensionality to it. So initial thoughts. What is common of all of these? Are these utilizing the affordances of AR to their fullest? These are questions that I was thinking about. And so some patterns among these are that they are visually target-based. So you have to look at a piece of paper to spawn the stuff that you want to learn about, which isn't a bad thing. Like I said, accessibility, right? It's cheap. It's just a piece of paper, and all of a sudden you have a whole entire physics lab. Yeah.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you probably know more about it. So why would I need a piece of paper to do this? Why would I need to go in AR and do this kind of stuff?
So the way that...
Two questions. So the first one is you don't have to have targets so much anymore. Like now we can just do vertical plane mapping. So we're getting away from targets, which is good. So
right. And that's kind of what that last one was doing, where it kind of just detects that there's a horizontal plane and then can just spawn on top of it whatever's coded into the app.
Why would I need to get that spawn in my environment? Why wouldn't it be like...
Why does it help to have the 3D? Is that your question?
Like, why do I have to have like a table to this? Why
So that gets into the mechanics of the software development kits, which I'll talk a little bit about that later.
Let me finish my question.
Yeah.
So why do I need to have physical space to experience this?
You could do GPS, right? That could
Like
be your
like
spawn.
entirely like a virtual environment. It's entirely 100%.
Well, you can, and that's...
You could cover the surface of your phone. You need something to start.
Why would I need AR to do this kind of stuff? Why would
You don't need AR. Like so in this last video here.
Maybe I'm not asking my question.
No, you're not. Are you trying to say 3D?
So like this one, this is a three-dimensional representation.
Great, but so somebody's pointing the phone on the table, right?
Well, this is just on your phone.
Oh,
and this is what you're saying, right?
That's what I'm saying. Why do I have to point on the table for this?
Because you cannot look around. Well, for something like this, honestly, I think when we're just virtually recreating physical labs, this is fine. Okay. This is great if we're replicating it. But the AR, and this is, when we get into the toolbox, like this is not something that is normally able to be done. So it's kind of like an entirely new way of thinking about teaching physics. But yeah, is that satisfactory? Okay, cool. So yeah, virtual, well, that's a good point. It's a virtual replication of physical labs. In terms of education, in like increasing or making more efficient the process of teaching and learning, nothing, in terms of learning outcomes, there's nothing that is different about just virtually replicating a physical lab, right? It just makes it more accessible, and that's awesome. That's a step in the right direction. So it's easily accessible, and one note about all of these is that except for the Dat Thin Pwn one, all the assets are developed by small teams or it's crowdsourced. So what that means, that can be good or bad depending on your view. Small teams mean that bug fixes and updates roll out very slowly, or updates to your phone could break the app, things like that, and it'll come out really slowly. And in crowdsourcing, the quality of the content isn't always going to be great, so you have to sift through a lot of quote-unquote garbage until you get to something that's really usable in your classroom. But on the flip side, these are generally the most enthusiastic people that you'll ever meet. Everyone really cares about their pet project. So take that how you will. So enter Physics Toolbox AR. And again, if you haven't downloaded it yet, Physics Toolbox AR. like Mina said, it's by this couple that got this grant to expand the way we teach fields, right? And this is something that the physicists can empathize with me, that teaching fields is a struggle. We always have a 2D representation of fields, but it is really a 3-dimensional phenomena. And conceptualizing this stuff, at its heart, it comes to the center of the entire STEM workforce, industry, anything you can think of. You need to understand how waves are, at least conceptually, how fields work, at least conceptually. So take out the app. Let's do something. Woohoo! Yeah. So what I want you guys to do is wait, is anyone having problems installing the app or does not have? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So the objective of this activity is to kind of just probe the ambient magnetic field from Earth here in this room. And so do that for a little while, and let's see what you get. I'll walk around helping out whoever needs it. Right. So, yeah, to create field vectors, you just tap the screen. If you want to do it automatically, you tap the little button on the right, bottom right. I very much prefer to spam the crap out of the arrows. Just do it. Just do it in a bunch of different places. Yes. So, let's see. Can you see your phone? Oh, I just restarted the thing. So if it ever, actually, I'll just say this to everyone. Yeah, that'd be a good one. If your app bugs out, just hit the refresh button in the top right. You guys got it?
You want to make more, I think that's interesting.
Sweet.
I think when it's red, it's going. Or is it big?
All right, hey, you got it working? Oh, nice. Sweet. So everyone's getting good stuff. This is great. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. So it's producing arrows at your phone in this space. So move your phone around, and it'll continue to produce arrows as you move your phone around. And so now back up from it. That's the magnetic field at this point in space. That's what it just recorded for you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll talk about the mechanics of it in a second once we do that.
That's super neat.
Yeah, hell yeah.
What do I do with this information?
How's everyone doing?
You learn. Yeah. Oh, this is the lens, yeah. Wait, before you start playing with the magnets intensely, let me talk to you. What's up? So I'll talk about the mechanics of it after a couple slides. Does everyone have a general feel for the app? Do you guys kind of understand how it works now? Respond. Yes.
Yeah. So these were vectors created in this point in space. That's what you did. Well, this is this is that's the Earth's magnetic field. Yeah, so this is actually really far. This isn't really effective. Yeah. Oh, really? I should have brought the remagnetizer. Any luck? Great. Awesome. So that's good. This is really all I wanted people to know for now. Yeah. That just makes it so it automatically produces them for you, so you don't have to tap the screen. If you wanted to get, just because obviously more data, better patterns, better way to see it, if you back up for a second, you can just spawn a bunch faster if you wanted to.
Somebody that doesn't have any.
Yeah.
How do we know where the?
So you would have to, well, at this point I just wanted you to see, this is Earth's ambient magnetic field. This is what compasses see, and that's how they know how to point north. I'll talk a little bit about these in a second. All right, guys, I'm going to start talking again. If you just spammed a bunch of arrows at a certain point in space, all near each other, you would have gotten something like this. This is probably like 100 arrows or so, just kind of in one spot. And you can see they're all pointing in the same direction, right? And this is what a compass will see, right? It'll feel this magnetic field and point to magnetic north, right? And that's kind of the connection between just doing it in random space and real world. Oh, oops. If you notice, it's pointing down, right?
Why is it?
Why is it pointing down? That's a little weird, right? Because you're used to 2D compasses, and this is a fault of 2D. Like I said, 2D is awful for this. Why is it pointing down? We don't know, right? Any ventures?
I've seen those images.
Right. So what it comes down to is that Earth's geodynamo, at least as far as we can tell, replicates a bar magnet. So all of these bar magnets, these are bar magnets. What that looks like is that. So I've got a bar magnet in here. I put iron filings. This is normally how I would demonstrate this. But you can see there's no directionality. It's kind of like you have to take it on the professor's word that, no, it goes north to south, I promise. No, but with this, there's a model, and we can verify it with our app. And this is a great way to connect our environment with the users of the app. This is a powerful thing. So if you notice, do I have a laser pointer? I do. Okay. So it's really, really strong at the poles, right? And it kind of flips over as you pass the equator. So what Vieira Software did is they had some people from different parts of the world do what you guys just did, the ambient field where they were. This is in Stockholm, Sweden, very far north. You see the angle, how different it is from us? Because we're closer to the equator, right? This is Lima, Peru, near the equator. It's pretty much horizontal, right? And then we go to the southern hemisphere, Australia, it's pointing up. So this is kind of that experimental verification that the bar magnet theory of Earth is actually pretty good. So just a little bit about the people who developed it, and a little more about the NSF grant. The future of the workforce depends on concepts like this being understood conceptually. And it also requires people in the future to be able to interface with technology comfortably. And this app kind of pushes the gamut towards that, because it's all about the future. It's all about the education and workforce of students now. And another key facet of what they were doing is giving the users a sense of ownership about the environment. And I don't think I need to tell you guys about why that's important, given climate change and all that sort of stuff. So keep that in mind as we talk about the mechanics of it all. So there were a lot of questions on, okay, how does this work? What does it mean? What is it looking at? So your phone has all these sensors on it, and the main physics toolbox software, the non-AR part, utilizes all of these. You've got your accelerometer, gyroscope, roller coaster, inclinometer, proximeter, all these sorts of things. And these actually manifest themselves in your phones in the form of keystone features, like auto off when you're on the phone, on the screen, or auto adjust brightness, or things like that. And so the Physics Toolbox AR app uses a combination of these, namely that there's a magnetometer, which is usually at the top of your phone. There's an accelerometer, so it can tell how it's accelerating in what direction linearly. There's a gyroscope, so it can tell how you rotate the phone, right? And there's a camera, so it can track light intensity, motion, gather perspective on its environment. And you'll probably, if you're an XR enthusiast, if you know about the HoloLens, there's inside-out tracking, which is like two cameras that give a sense of parallax and give depth to the scene that it's looking at. With this, we're just with one camera, so you can imagine how hard that was to get parallax with one camera. I don't know the specific details about that, but it's really cool stuff. It's definitely an evolution in AR to achieve that. But yeah, were there any other questions about how, like, the mechanics of the app? Go for it.
So how do we know, do they not use like GPS to do that? Because they could just plug in the GPS location of you and have that arrow pointed to your specific GPS location.
I guess,
They're not using that.
Yeah, but like how would they
I guess they could, but then it's kind of like you're just getting information spit at you again, as opposed to exploring it yourself.
Reading in real
But like,
time.
Yeah.
One thing they want to do is get rid of the background micro Teslas, just so you can just read around the magnets, and that's very hard to do. They can't do that.
So how are they doing it without the GPS? Is it just like a combination of like?
Well, there's a magnetometer in your phone that gets the X, Y, Z components of the magnetic field, and based on where you are, it can track the motion and acceleration, so it knows where that arrow was in relation to where you are now. Then you can place an arrow there, and so on and so forth until you get a lot of data. So, yeah. Good? Cool.
What is the roller coaster part of the phone?
I actually haven't played with that one. I was also curious. I didn't get a chance to do all this stuff with the just regular phone sensor kit. I don't know.
So it's motion vectors, motion
yeah.
maps, and motion vectors.
What are you asking about? Which one?
The roller coaster right here. I'm not sure. Maybe circular acceleration.
Go to the amusement park and take on the roller coaster.
Download the app. Yeah, check it out.
Yeah. When you're on a roller coaster, you hit go, and it will tell you the forces, the G force and the.
I guess some of this stuff, like the roller coaster, would be a combination of some of the other sensors working in tandem, which is essentially what the Physics Toolbox AR is. It's all these sensors working together to generate those arrows correctly in 3D space. So the software that makes, oh yeah, go for it.
What are the units on the XYZ coordinates? Is that meters or feet? Or?
I don't know. It would probably be like micro.
It's coded in meters to start with the other physics toolbox stuff that I've used.
I would assume that depends, because I mean the equation will change if you switch from like Teslas to milliteslas to microteslas, like because it's spitting out microteslas. So whatever the distance or the length unit is going to change to fit microteslas, right? So, cool. So the software part of things, that was the hardware part that all our phones have. The software part is currently in the mobile market. These are the two most popular ones: AR Core, which is by Google, and AR Kit, which is by Apple. And these each have their own benefits and drawbacks. Hey, where's my slide on that? Oh, here it is. So, Android versus iPhone, the age-old debate. This is another battle in the long-waged war. Android, 85% of all smartphones in the world are Android.
That's right.
Woo, Android! However, iOS hardware is consistent. Androids can be super low-end or super high-end. And generally up here, this is where you compare yourself with Apple. But everything on the lower end, a lot of the sensors aren't there, or they're bad sensors, or they can't support AR Core. So that's something to think about in development. Yeah, so all iPhones since 2015, 2016 have ARKit built into the OS. So as opposed to Google, you have to download it separately along with the app if you don't already have it. Maybe some of you had that when you just downloaded it right now. ARKit has more developers and more documentation. So the community is just more vibrant around iOS. But AR Core works on iOS, whereas ARKit doesn't work on Android. And it keeps positional data longer and maps out the environment faster. So there's drawbacks and benefits to either, but the thing is that things are always changing. This is the main thing with new technologies. Things are always changing. Google can come out of nowhere and develop a feature that ARKit doesn't have, and vice versa. They could run Google out of business in the AR market. Who knows? We'll see. So a little bit more about bar magnets. So this is actually pretty cool, but that's kind of awful to look at, right? This is a bar magnet and a bunch of compasses around it pointing from north to south. That's kind of hard to look at, even though it is a good representation. And here are the iron filings again, going from north to south, but you can't really tell. So these are the drawbacks. I'll show you a couple of videos that I took. So this is a bar magnet, and hopefully you guys can make images like these too. And you can see the heat map. Blue is low intensity, red is high intensity. You can see the gradients between north and south with directionality in 3 dimensions. So this is a really big deal. Currently, there is no way to visualize this 3D in real time in a lab. There is no apparatus that exists for that. So this is why this is really revolutionary. Magnetic field of a current carrying wire. Our world runs on electricity, right? There's magnetic fields being generated all over the place. And understanding that is the first step to engineering or medicine. Here's a circular magnetic field around a current carrying wire.
So is that a situation in the field somewhere that you need to know what the magnetic field is like?
Wait, sorry, what?
Is there like a practical situation out there in the field that somebody who's practicing this, that you need to know what the magnetic field is?
Well, yeah, so say an electrical engineer needs to survey a building. You can't see the wires. You can have a device that outputs a magnitude. What about the direction? That's a lot harder. And if it's displayed on a 2D thing, is it really accurate? What if you turn it on the degree of freedom that 2-dimensional projection can't do? Whereas with this, you go up to the wall, magnetic field's that way, it means the wire's going up, right? The current's going up. That's just one off the top of my head. I'm sure there's a lot more uses for that. Yeah. So that's the magnet. Oh, here.
There's a question about the wire. Probably it's not there. How's the directionality of the magnetic field there on the current carrying wire?
The directionality?
Yeah.
So,
how's the direction?
hold on.
Those field lines,
This thing isn't letting me go back.
They're not just circular. Which way are they going? I couldn't see.
Yeah, let me just restart.
There's a tip on the vector. Maybe it needs to
I
be
don't know if I'm
wired.
ever going to use Google Slides again.
Just go back to that view again.
Yeah, 1 second. And here we go.
There.
Okay. So you can see that they're going this way.
Okay. And then so why aren't they this colored differently on the
Oh,
bottom?
so that was
Reason?
yeah. So this is a heat map. That's one of the features. You can turn off the heat map if you want, but basically warmer colors mean higher intensity. Colder colors mean lower intensity. So the blue ones, these are really far away, versus these, which are really close to the wire. So the inverse square law kicks in, and that's where that intensity difference comes from.
And they're supposed to be shorter, so maybe we should make that, we should use length also in the vector. But
Yeah.
They get too big too quick, but I think we should make the tip fatter, because you're right, that looks
That's
just
Right.
correct.
cylinder.
I would like to see a little bit more clear in terms of the field lines. So
Mhm.
maybe separate field lines. Here is one in the perpendicular plane. the wire, there's another plane, that's the field line
Yeah,
there.
so it,
Yeah, well, I mean, it could be like those, but it's a little hard to just have their own, a bunch of arrows that.
right. And this is more, again, for like the conceptual understanding. Doing actual like lab reports about this with quantitative data, at least at this point, seems a little difficult. Especially, there's one weird quirk with this app where like the magnetometer is usually in the top of the phone right here, but it places the arrow at the center of your camera's image. So there's a displacement between where it's reading the magnetometer and where it's actually placing the arrow in space. And that was where I got a lot of issues about getting good pictures. It's definitely an art. And I think that's one of the great parts about it. It really engages the user to be creative about how they get the data, gives them the agency to do that in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure as this gets rolled out to a lot of different students and educators, best practices for how we do this can be developed, right? Also, notice one thing that I saw specifically with this, which is the arrows that are supposed to be behind the wire show up in front of the wire. This is a lack of something called occlusion in AR, which is pretty much a virtual object knowing whether to be behind or in front of something. That's something that just rolled out in December. So that's why this app doesn't do that yet. And like I said, it's a small team. Even though they're enthusiastic, it's a little difficult to get that going as quickly as possible. So I just have a couple more examples. Here's a coil. It's actually this coil right here. So it goes really strongly through the center and kind of loops around, almost like a dipole, but there are technicalities there that make it not like a dipole. Another. So in the settings, you're able to change the color. You can do a heat map, and you can also add the magnitude, the actual number that's reading, to display with the arrow. So there's just a little amount of options there.
So you said the heat map is related to the magnitude?
Yes. Warmer colors, very high number. Cooler colors, very low number. So actually, you can even see here, this is kind of more the ambient magnetic field. This is super far away from the coil. But then as we get closer, it starts to go in to the coil, which is consistent with what you would learn in a textbook.
So metals in a magnetic field also themselves magnetized. Does this app compensate for that?
Compensate?
Yeah.
Unless it's like a screener.
It should. I mean, it's just a raw magnetometer reading from the point of where the phone is. So any magnetic effects, it's being resolved right there in the magnetometer. So, any other questions? Cool. So that's the coil. And then I've got one more here, which is the horseshoe magnet, which I've got over here, by the way. Stronger magnets tend to make a lot better visuals. So this is... Oh, what? Oh, no. Oh, was there actually a background?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know much about technology. So, coil and wire. Okay, horseshoe magnet. Nice 2D representation, right? But again, we get these really great visuals, north to south, many different places.
Don, have you been able to get videos this nice with using the app, or have you?
No, so here's another weird thing about this.
It seems like it'd be really hard to get.
Yeah, so all of for whatever reason, and I'm going to ask Christian about this, the image stabilization software that's built into modern phones does not translate over to this. So that's why it's so shaky, even though generally videos now can be taken. Even if you're shaking, it'll compensate. This app excludes that feature for some reason. I'm not sure why. And so, yeah. Oh, and this was just a sense of ownership of environment. A little note here. This is a studio monitor that I have as my speaker system at home. And I was like, okay, I'm just playing with the app on my desk. And then I saw, wait, the reading's really high right here. Why is that? So I started plotting arrows. Turns out it's all pointing towards here, and there's a giant coil, a giant transformer right there. And it's pointing right into it. And I was like, wow, that's something I never would have even thought about. Sitting at my desk, but with the app, I'm able to do that sort of thing. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you for listening. And yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to ask me. Otherwise, feel free to probe the magnetic fields of these associated setups. And thanks. Yeah. Oh.
How long do you think this will take before it kind of reaches its peak potential output?
I would say we need to do all of the actual education research as well as wait for a lot of AR features to catch up. So I don't know, Mina, do you have it?
So what if we take education out of there and just say the app itself?
Yeah, I think it's explosive as being gold drop, right? I think the occlusion would be good to work at.
Okay.
And the recording, maybe.
The two big issues are the occlusion and the disconnect between where the arrow is placed and where the magnetometer is read.
You can't fix that because every camera has a different placement of the magnet.
Right. Magnetometer is always different, and unless we have a complete spec list of every phone that might download this, which is an incredible undertaking, I don't see it happening. So, and I think that's also why this is better for conceptual study as opposed to raw quantitative data that you can get from it. But yeah, good question.
So for education purposes, you said you want to look at do teacher, have teachers involved with it, and then possibly try and get it into classrooms.
Right.
So how would I be involved in that process? Because I would love to this is all.
Ask Mina.
Eventually.
She is a co-PI, so if you have questions about that, any of you actually, please.
Donna,
up there.
I
Yeah.
would like to bring it up to you now. Are you working with Rebecca and Christian Vieira on this?
I'm in correspondence with them, but I'm pretty much, if I find flaws, I'll email them about it. And
So Rebecca was here on campus 2 summers ago for the computational modeling. and
right,
physics
I remember actually.
class. Okay, and I would say we have an electricity and magnetism modeling workshop with physics teachers happening this summer. On
Oh,
campus
great.
Here, and we know the co-leaders. The co-leaders know Rebecca Vieira, so it might be a good place. And are you teaching locally now?
Yeah.
So if you keep in contact with my methods of teaching physics class, we can probably hook all of you guys up.
Perfect.
Either through that. And several of the Arizona teachers I was just talking about, we've been to Rebecca and Christian's apartment. So it's
Oh,
really
nice.
weird to see them here.
That's great, yeah.
So we do have that connection, like Nicole's been over there too.
So yeah, well, let's keep, let's
and
definitely.
It might be something, you might want to set something up for this summer for the modeling workshops for physics teachers that occur on ASU's campus.
And the other co-PI who I want to plug is
weird.
Colleen McGowan.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, so
Great.
Colleen is,
Yes.
yeah.
So, yeah. Who graduated?
Colleen
Yeah.
did
One more time?
computational modeling of physics.
Yes.
Oh, I'm just, at least all I know at this point, I am a QA tester for this app. I'm pretty much trying to break it with, and compare it, continually compare it to current physics lab apparatus, and just see where it fits into the broader physics educational goals. Because obviously it's a lot more than just fields, but this is a very big step for the teaching of fields. So just trying to figure out how we can incorporate it in the future. Yeah.